The astral plane was gone. Twilight? No, she wasn't Twilight anymore. She was Twin Blades of the Solar Guard. You could remember graduation day from the training camp. Her parents were there, her professors, but no. She didn't have any professors at training camp, yet she did have professors. She remembered attending classes on magic, but why would she attend classes on magic? She wasn't a unicorn. But Twilight? No. Twin Blades? No, Twilight. Remembered using magic. Levitation, teleportation, transfiguration. Those were all spells she knew. She had to have had a horn, but she wasn't born with one. No, she was born with wings. She could remember learning to fly when she was young, but no. She remembered learning to fly from Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy. She didn't know them when she was young. They taught her to fly when she got her wings for the coronation. But why would she need any of that? She wasn't a princess, so she couldn't get coronated. And she wouldn't need to get wings because she already had them. Why was she a unicorn? Was she a Pegasus? Had she trained with the guards or as a student of magic? Did she have friends in Ponyville or play cards with soldiers in the barracks? Was Shining Armor her commanding officer or brother? Was she supposed to guard Princess Celestia or learn from her? She did not know. But yet she did know. Yet she didn't know. Somehow she knew both were true. Who was she? Where was she? What was going on? Why was she looking into a mirror? A mirror. A mirror where she saw a familiar figure standing. It was her reflection, but it wasn't. It was Twin Blade's reflection in the mirror, with her eyes shut as if she was sleeping while standing. But she could see the mirror. How could she see the mirror if Twin Blade's eyes were shut? That meant that she wasn't Twin Blade's. She was Twilight Sparkle. With that single thought, Twilight's mind began to calm and sort itself out. She remembered how now the warning of the spell, that until the melding was complete, the minds would not be able to completely separate themselves. For a brief time, she had been both herself and Twin Blades. The contradictions in the memories caused that what Twilight could only describe as a variety of insanity. It was not an experience she'd ever looked forward to having again. Still, the spell was now complete, and the division between her mind and Twin Blades was now presented before her consciousness in a way conducive to her mind. A mirror. A mirror that separates minds in a way separating the world of two ponies. In a way, it reminded Twilight of the mirror that led to the strange world of two-legged creatures and fiddly things called fingers. The mirror now presented to her consciousness was the thin veil that separated her mind from Twin Blades. Yet the reflective veil seemed only to label the information. Her mind could still remember aspects of Twin Blades' life. She could recall bits she had skipped over during her brief insanity, as if they were from her own life. Twin Blades' training with winged swords and her service as a guard. She knew those memories. Yet the spell, the veil before her, let her mind know those memories were not her own. She could access them, but she would not be driven mad by the contradictions they created. Still, that did not mean Twilight could walk away from the spell simply knowing everything Twin Blades did. Once the connection was broken, she'd lose all the memories, and only keep the information for herself to experience it. Make a copy in her own memories, like taking notes from a book she borrowed from a library. As Twilight came to the appropriate distinctions, she realized the difficulty of her goal. If Twin Blade's mind was truly compared to a book, it was like a dictionary that had been scrambled around. Twilight knew the information she sought within, but had no way of picking it out. She had to remember things she didn't even know she knew, which was a paradox of thinking. Twilight had studied many books about the mind while at Celestia's School for Gifted Unicorns. It's how she was able to make use of the memory spell when she needed to free her friends from Discord's influence. One way to think of memories was association. If she thought of a word, then things connected to that word would come to mind. If she thought of the rain boom, She'd think of Rainbow Dash and of Cloudsdale's Best Young Flyers competition. She'd even think of the day when she and her friends realized they had a special bond before they even met each other because of Rainbow's very first sonic rainboom. That was how her memory spell restored her friends. Her magic caused a cascade effect. She got them to remember one thing about themselves, and then the one thing connected to their other memories. These memories then connected to the others, and the domino effect continued until their minds had been restored. All she needed was a sight or a smell or sound that could trigger the memory she needed. Or maybe all she needed was a few key phrases. It was then that realization flooded Twilight, and in a moment the miasma around her focused. It could have been her own memory or one that belonged to Twinblades. It didn't matter. The memory presented itself before Twilight was one that they both shared now. It was a memory of the wall, marred and marked with the scratches of Twinblade's sword. Those words, phrases, they were the keys. Each one was tied to something important, and by tugging on the metaphorical string, Twilight could draw Twinblade's memories to the surface. She could get the message Twinblades was trying to leave in her scratches. She only had to pick the first phrase she would use. 5 lights. It wouldn't be the same this time. It would turn out all right. It wouldn't be the same this time. It would turn out all right. This mantra was the background to all Twinblade's thoughts as she pressed her body against the cool stone wall. She inched towards the intersection and peered around the corner of the connecting hallway. She remained perfectly still for a few moments, scanning for any sign of danger. When she saw none, she made a single motion with her wing. A clatter of armor came from behind her as the 3 of her other guards and her squad came up to her command. The formation moved like water down a river. They were of a single mind, acting on maneuvers they had practiced to the point that they were muscle memory. The quartet searched rooms, checking each one they came across thoroughly before moving to the next. They acted silently, fulfilling the mission they had been given. While many of their comrades stayed behind to protect Princess Luna and the party guests, they and a few other squads searched the castle. They were looking for Princess Celestia, Cadence, and Twilight, as well as Discord's stars, which needed to be snuffed out to end the twisted game. And, as luck would have it, the first star was very close. Twinblades opened one unsuspecting door to find it did not lead to a room. Instead, the space inside was a cavern. The seams between the brick and the stone wall melted away, the floor becoming solid brick. Spires grew from the floor and hung from the ceiling, like ragged teeth of a devouring monster. It was the depths of that dark, dark cavern that a single point of light twinkled. It was sky blue, like the exit of a tunnel that led to a lush meadow, the brightest of sunny days. But the cavern stood still between Twinblade's squad and the welcoming light. The cavern too large to fit in the castle and far too quiet. A cavern that put Twinblades on edge, making every muscle in her body tense as if she was glaring down on Ursa Major all by herself. Twinblades inched away, even as her fellows came up behind her. Her legs were starting to quiver. She heard a faint scream of someone she knew was already dead. No, this wasn't right. It was too much like the catacombs. How long before the bent reality started to spill into their sense of time? What if it was already happening? The guests? The princess? Would they return to find they had suffered the same fate as Fortress? What about Nightgaze? Something lurking in the caverns to crush them, like the bones crushed him? Would any of them make it out alive? Lieutenant! A shout from one of the guards finally brought Twinblades back. She was sweating profusely, her breathing heavy. Sorry, she forced out, coughing to clear her throat. She had to keep it together. She was the leader of the squad. If she faltered, it would put them all in danger. No, she wouldn't let any of this happen that time. It would work out okay. She had to believe that. Keep in a tight formation, and watch our flanks, Twinblades told her squad mates. We get in, snuff that star, and get out. If something goes wrong, we retreat together, and bring back reinforcements. I don't know if that's the star from Discord's riddle, and I don't know if it'll move if we leave to get help. I do know one thing, though. I'm not losing any soldiers tonight." The others in the squad nodded, all four proceeding into the room with Twin Blades at the lead. They found a path between the stalagmites. One soldier watched the flank, the other two watched the sides, and Twin Blades was at the front. It was a full circle of protection. The star they had seen, twinkling from the cave entrance, became more distant as they drew closer. Twin Blades began to make out a ring of white wax around the light's base. It was the flame of a candle, which danced as it waving to them. They closed in on the candle, traversing the cavern without incident. They, however, never felt it was safe to lower their guard. Twinblade's paranoia was proving infectious. Every soldier feeling a growing sense of dread on their skin the further the group got to the exit. Just a few dozen steps from the candle, Twinblade stopped, bringing the whole unit to a halt. She flicked her ears and turned her head. She was sure she had heard something. A clatter of tiny stone against a floor. Perhaps the pebble had been kicked by one of her or her comrades. If that was true, they had nothing to fear. But Twin Blades wasn't going to take that risk. She glanced back to one of the other guards from the squad, the unicorn. She mouthed her instructions, her words nothing but the smallest wisps of whispers. The unicorn, however, got the message. The magic built in his horn while Twin Blades and the two guards readied themselves. The magic was cast, and the room became bathed in the burning red light of a flare spell. With the bright light came a hissing, one which made the three quickly look to the stalactite riddled ceiling. There they saw a furry mass of mishmash horror, leathery wings the size of chariots, and a large fang-filled muzzle, sprouting from a petite frame of a pale-coated mare. The hooves on her legs had become grasping claws, yet around her neck hung a ravaged remains of a white collar and a red tie. Is that Raven?" the unicorn guard asked. One of the other guards took an anxious step back. "Is this what Discord's riddle meant? Are we all going to change like that?" "Pull yourselves together!" Twinblade snapped, flaring her wings to draw her swords strapped to her feathery appendages. Though she couldn't deny it either. The creature above them was an uncanny resemblance to Princess Celestia's personal assistant. "We can't think about that now. Two of you with me. Flash flare. Get on that candle. If that is the star Discord mentioned, we have to put it out." The hulking mass above the quartet shifted, as if reacting to the words. The light from the flare spell was fading, and as it did, so did the pained hissing from the horrified, disgusting figure of Raven. She turned her body slowly, claws clinging to the ceiling. She bent her head down to look at them. Her eyes were wild, as if not an ounce of sanity remained in her. "I think she heard you," the unicorn guard whispered. "It doesn't matter. We're not losing anyone tonight." The memory finished playing, Twilight soaking it in. It was similar to what happened when she found Cadence. Twinblades and her fellow guards managed to snuff the light, and the moment they did, everything regained a sense of normalcy. The room became an office, simple and well kept. Celestia's assistant, the bat-like monstrosity, disappeared, as Cadence had. Though Twilight knew she couldn't expect any other result, Twinblades was alive and well, after all. But some information Twilight questioned had been proven true. There had been more than just 3 lights before she arrived at the castle. There had been at least 4, but the existence of even one more likely meant that there were in fact 2 others. 2 candles that had been put out before Twilight even reached the foyer. But then why would Luna lie to her? Why would Luna change Discord's riddle to say 3 stars instead of saying that there were 5? The big center message of Twinblade's wall scratchings seemed more and more plausible that Luna was lying. But why? What reason would the princess have to lie? Twilight couldn't help but hope that that answer to the question, and many others, would lay in Twinblade's memories. She had to keep going. She She had to find out the truth. She recalled the memory of the scratched wall once more and selected another phrase. She held it in her mind, and as before, Twinblade's memories responded, one memory rushing forward to answer Twilight's summons. Library. They were the only two left. The others had fallen to Discord's game, consumed by horrific transformations of their own. Princess Luna had been able to reverse the effects, to a degree. Discord's magic was transforming ponies into their fears. It explained why Raven, Princess Celestia's assistant, had morphed into a bat. It was no secret that she found bats and many varieties of the rodents unbearable. Princess Luna's magic, however, proved ideal for undoing the effects. She put some ponies into waking dreams, charms of her sleepwalking. Their minds became occupied with dreams so pure and sweet that they hid away the fears in their minds. Without fear to latch onto, Discord's transformations reversed, returning the ponies to normal. It meant that most of the party guests and Twinblade's fellow guards were safe, but it also meant that she and Princess Luna were racing against the clock. So far, the two had been spared. There was no telling how long it would be before they succumbed. And you're sure that it was Princess Luna? It was, Luna answered, as she and Twinblades continued down the hall. I wish to believe some part of her is resisting the transformation. That would explain why she has suffered only minor changes. Still, the only answer she gave to my words were snarls. I fear she is not in control of her actions, and she is too powerful for me to subdue with a sleepwalking spell as I have done others. But do not worry, Twinblades. I led her away to a far corner of the castle. We should have more than enough time to snuff the star I saw before she returns to guard it. Twinblades nodded, but did not lower her guard. She stayed a few steps ahead of the princess, trying to make herself the target of any beasts that might pounce on them in the dark. It was not ideal, but the princess's safety was above her own. Luna had the best chance of beating Discord's game. They could end this before anyone got seriously hurt, or anything happened to them. They could prevent others from suffering as her comrades had in the catacombs. We are here, Princess Luna said, the pair coming to a stop outside of a pair of large doors. A single surge of the princess's magic, and the doors swung open to reveal the room beyond. The light was closer than the previous had been. Even from the doorway, Twinblades could make out the details of the candle. The candle rested on a lantern, which itself was on top of a pile of splintered wood. The wreckage of the room's furnishings, which looked like they were comprised of smashed bookshelves, were stacked high into a pile, which reached all the way to the room's ceiling. In a pile was a large hole, to which Twinblades looked like a burrow or nest. There was something else in this room, something else guarding the light which lay just beyond the opening of the burrow. Princess, stay here, Twinblades said, stepping forward gingerly. Let me take a look first. As you wish, Twinblades, Luna replied, letting her venture into the room. Already a sensation of déjà vu washed over Twinblades. She remembered all too clearly what happened with Raven, and now she could sense the same looming danger. There had been something in the room with her. There was no other reason why the room would be as it is. Discord's magic had changed the room, had created a pile of smashed bookshelves to be the nest for something. There had to be something. And Twinblades heard the first sound of that something. A shifting of stone. It came from within the burrow. The lantern containing the candle rose up, as if being lifted by a Pegasus to be hung on a street lamp. But it was far from the truth. Slowly slithered into the light and poured in from the hallway and windows. The true guardian of the candle came into view. A creature who held its head as tall as a mountain. The movement of its body sounded like a tumbling bookshelf and a rock slide all rolled into one. It was as large as a snake, and as full-grown as a full-grown dragon. The snake comprised not of skin and flesh, but of a maelstrom of broken books that flowed, ripped, and molded around one another. Rectangular stone boxes dotted the length of the creature's body, armoring it against attack. To Twinblades it looked like the tomes, and each one looked to be about 2 sizes too small for the part the snake's body it protected. It looked as if each one was squeezing down on the serpent books. More and more the snake's body slithered out of its den, until finally its tail came out. The tip was that of a rattlesnake, with hollow book covers forming the characteristic segments and bulges. Yet, at the tip of the rattle was a hair, a purple tail with a few colored streaks. Twinblades recognized that tail almost instantly, and looked to the head of the snake, jaw hanging in shocked disbelief. "Princess Twilight?" The snake flicked out a tongue, made of scrolls, before opening its mouth, its fangs formed of ragged book pages. It hissed while rattling its tail, the defining sound of the rattle mixing with the pained screams of Twilight, though her exact words were lost in the natural sound of the serpent's tail. "Hold on!" Twinblade shouted, flaring her wings and drawing her namesake 2 swords. "I'm coming." She took to the air in a single leap. Her wings surged, carrying her to the snake's eye level while her wing blades glinted in the moonlight from the windows. The serpent lunged, paper fangs bare and book-ended mouth gaping. It snapped short of catching Twinblades, the sound of 1,000 books being slammed closed at once. But Twinblades did not let the sound make her falter. She banged hard, using the opportunity to strike at the snake. She raked one of her swords along the backside of the beast's face, the sharpened edge cleaving pages and book covers cleanly. She left a deep mark, and from that cut, pages surged out a spray of blood. At the same time, the snake hissed in pain, and Twilight's own wails intensified. A few of her own words managed to break through the symphony. "Don't destroy my books!" The serpent spun, the books on the back of its neck rattling, pages ripping from those tomes, growing and spreading until the rattlesnake had the hood of a cobra. At the same time, its eyes, which had been little more than spherical balls of paper, began to glow. A sickly green hue overtook them, and a black essence spilled from them as if they were embers leaking wisps of smoke. The snake reared its head back, then lunged forward. Its mouth spread wide, and from the depths of its throat spewed a hailstorm of black crystals. Twinblades had to summon every ounce of her strength she had in her wings to save herself. She banked upward, zipping away from the volley of dagger-like crystals, even as a few managed to slice hairs from the end of her tail. She continued to climb, flying along the edge of the wall, while the snake continued its assault. It turned its head, trying to point a spray of crystals at Twinblades. The crystals began to zip past Twinblade's back legs, a few leaving deep cuts. Yet she didn't falter. She pushed herself to fly faster and stay ahead of the onslaught. She acted on instinct, flying circles around the serpent of books as the walls came filled with jagged, spiky crystals. It was never enough to stop the snake's assault, which was as relentless as it seemed unending. But Twinblade saw an opportunity, and she dove hard from the ceiling to seize it. She tugged her wings, trying to gain as much momentum as possible. The spray of crystals followed her as always, but that was what she wanted. When she was but moments from hitting the floor, Twinblade spread her wings and leveled off. Her momentum carried her above the floor with the speed of an arrow launched from a bow. She soared past the body of the snake and glanced back just in time to see it strike itself with its own spray of crystals. As her own blade had done, the crystals cut and sliced at the books that made up the snake's body, shredding pages, following from the wounds like blood. But the injuries did not seem to slow the snake. In fact, its motions only became quicker and more erratic. Twilight's screams grew louder as well, fluctuating constantly from crushing fear to unbridled rage. Twinblades grimaced, eyes searching for the beast's weakness in its seemingly impenetrable body. Her blades could not cut the stone tombs that guarded much of the snake's body, and cutting the books only seemed to make the creature, and by extension Twilight, angrier. It made sense in a way. A book sliced to pieces was only a pile of paper. The only way to make a book something more than a stack of paper would be to... Inspiration hit Twinblades, and her eyes quickly went to the lantern that still hung from the base of the serpent's neck. The creature was still enraged from striking itself. It was her best opportunity, and she had to seize it before the snake recovered. So Twinblades flew to the nearest wall, turning her body and landing against the stone surface with all 4 hooves. Her legs tensed like coiled springs, and a moment later she pushed off from the wall. Wings spread as she flew straight at the serpent. Time seemed to slow as twin blades readied her swords. The serpent recovered from its own attack, and its eyes focused on her with murderous intent. With a hiss, like a great snake lunging forward, jaws ready to snap closed around twin blades. But she did not bank away as she did before. No. Twin blades flew straight into the waiting maw of the snake, diving in without a hint of hesitation. The snake's mouth snapped shut. For a brief moment there was silence. It was the silence of death as the snake began to relax its body in triumph. Yet a moment later, shrieks of pain and hisses of agony erupted from the snake. The glint of a sword sticking out from the bottom of its jaw, the weapon driven through the beast's paper flesh. The sword shifted and jerked, sawing open a bigger wound. 3 pages of paper spewed in the air from the cut, and the snake threw its body around. It smashed its head against walls, and the tombs that lined its body crashed against the floor, leaving deep, cracked impressions. Still, from within the snake's mouth, twin blades continued her assault. Using one wing blade to keep herself anchored in the serpent's jaw, she used the other to make cut after cut. She poked and hunted around, searching for what she knew to be close to her location. She panted from the exertion, but she did not relent until she struck something, her sword singing out with a metallic clink. She had struck the lantern, and with another powerful shove of her blade, she dislodged the lantern and its candle from the bottom of the snake's jaw. The lantern fell, smashing into 1,000 pieces against the snake's body, the candle inside bouncing away, the flame remaining lit. But with each bounce, the red fire of the candle ignited ordinary orange flames. It caught fire to the books on the snake's body, and to the entire pile of wooden shelves that were its burrow. Twilight screamed, pierced the snake's own hissing shrieks. It tossed its head hard, and this time twin blades, allowing herself to be flung out of the serpent's jaw. She spread her wings, catching the air and entering a hover. She turned, looking on as more and more of the snake's body caught fire. It was being consumed, burning alive, and twin blades kept a watchful eye on the fire. She kept her swords at the ready. At a moment's notice, if she feared the real Twilight was in danger in the snake's tail, she would soar in to slice the rattle off. But that was not necessary. Amidst the fire, the candle lay, wax melting away under the intense heat. The wick of the candle was becoming exposed and beginning to burn in multiple places. In a few seconds, the candle itself was consumed, and a small fire that supported it. The single red flame amongst the glowing orange of the serpent's body went out. The moment that fire was gone, all others disappeared. Only the smoldering remains of the snake lingered, and even they began to fade. The books repaired themselves. Pages returned to their spires, the burnt ashes forming together again, the stone tomes along the snake's body crumbling into bricks, which assembled themselves into a chimney at the end of the room. The smashed shelves repaired themselves and formed neat rows as books filled every available space. In the span of but a few moments, the snake returned to its true form, that of the castle's library. And laying at the foot of the fireplace was Twilight. She had been a guardian. That one thought left Twilight reeling, like she'd been struck in the head by a high, hop-fly baseball. She wanted to believe it was a lie, or perhaps just some dream. Yet she also knew that the memories couldn't be modified. They were raw collections of twin blades. That meant she had been one of the guardians, that she had been a slithering, spitting, spine-covered snake. She couldn't remember how it happened herself. Twilight's imagination was more than happy to fill in the blanks. Maybe she'd been reading, looking for some clue, when her magic betrayed her. Her levitation layered a book on her, cocooning her inside, the sensation of the dark crystal surging through her, feeling the pain of the ripping pages. That was only one possibility. What if it had been the crystal magic first? What if it had started with a paper cut? Twilight caught her imagination, reeling it back in when she realized that fear of her own imagination had to wait. There was more important things to think about, but that would have to be something Twilight dealt with later. That memory only brought more questions. Why wouldn't Luna mention that in her notes? Why had things been different that one time? When all the other lights were snuffed, the pony guarding them disappeared as well, yet she had remained. For a moment, Twilight thought what she had seen in the astral plane. Could the tethers she had seen be a representation of Discord's influence? Twilight needed to know more. She needed to know what happened. Another word, another memory. She had to figure this out. Mirrors. Twinblades rushed over to Twilight. The princess's purple-striped mane was a mess, and her crown rested haphazardly on her brow. Still, Twinblades heard the subtle rising of air from Twilight's mouth as she felt a pulse on the princess's neck. Twilight was alive, and Twinblades let a smile crawl to her face. She took a few steps back, letting herself fall limp on one of the library's reading seats. "It's all right, Princess Luna. You can come in now," she said, waving a hoof as she went. "Remind me to commend you for an award when this is all over, Twinblades," Luna said, walking past, coming to a stop when she was next to Twilight. "You handled that expertly." Twinblades sat up in her seat, giving a respectful nod. "Thank you, Your Highness." Then she let her eyes wander to Twilight. "So, she didn't disappear like Raven did. Do you think we can wake her up? She might be able to tell us more about what's going on here, or even help us find the other 3 candles." "They're stars, Lieutenant. Don't forget Discord's riddle, as it can have multiple meanings. A candle in the darkness can be like a twinkling star in the night. In a way, I wonder if Discord is trying to mock me with his game." Luna mused, her eyes locked on Twilight's unconscious form. "But other things can be stars. Other things can be twinkling light that choose to defy the darkness. After all, I believe Discord would not have placed Twilight and my sister guarding the library for just one candle." "You think there's another star nearby?" Luna nodded as her horn began to glow. It was casting a spell, though Twinblades could not see what was being affected by the princess's magic. "I believe there is, Lieutenant. Please, go take another look around the shelves while I tend to Twilight." "Of course, Your Highness." Twinblades shifted her weight, sliding down from the seat. Her hooves hit the floor, their landing accompanied by a metallic clink. As she looked quickly to her side, turning her wing to reveal her left wing blade was simply limply on its mounted assembly. "It would seem your equipment got damaged in the fight," Luna said, the glow of her levitation spell encompassing the broken blade. With the release of a few snaps and buckles, the princess removed the sword and set it on a nearby table. "Don't worry. I'll try to fix it after I've made sure Twilight is comfortable." "Thank you," Twinblade said, awkwardly refolding her wing as she took a step back. As a guard, she should have noticed something had happened to her sword in the fight. It must have been when she was using it to help herself stay pinned to the inside of the snake's mouth. The embarrassment only seemed to increase when she realized the princess was going to be the one to fix her weapon. Such a thing would be normally unheard of for the royal guard. But then again, this was far from a normal situation. Still, Twinblades turned, taking a few steps towards the looming rows of bookshelves. Any sense of dread or danger in the room that it had possessed when she had first entered was gone. Now it was just a plain library. She dared to think it almost felt safe. The room had been cleansed with an extinguished flame. Yes, there had been a chance that Princess Celestia was still out there, that sooner or later she would return to hunt them as Princess Luna had warned. But for the moment, everything felt safe and secure. The feeling of being able to relax for the first time since Discord began his twisted game was like taking a long swig of something ice cold at the bar. The books looked to be in order, as far as she could tell. Her eyes skimmed their spires without really thinking about any of the titles. It made some odd sense that they had found Princess Twilight in the castle's library. It was hard to picture her being anywhere else, even if she had become a snake made out of her own precious books. The Royal Guard had even had a betting pool going, placing wagers on when they'd see Princess Twilight sneaking around the castle again. She used to have a stake in that pot, too. almost winning when Twilight snuck into the Star Swirl the Bearded Wing. She had withdrawn not long after that. It didn't feel the same betting on the princess when they had almost lost her, Princess Luna and Princess Celestia in the catacombs. A lot of things didn't feel right after that night. A rush of air by Twinblade's face drew her mind back into focus. She flared one wing, drawing her remaining sword. Her eyes needed only a few moments to search her surroundings before she found the source. It was a plain, ordinary bat. A little ball of blue-tinted fuzz was glaring down at her from the ceiling's rafters. Twinblades glared right back, but lowered her sword as she did. After having to face the transfigured raven earlier, a regular bat seemed like an annoyance at best. The bat, however, seemed intent to prove otherwise. The moment Twinblades lowered her sword, it launched itself from the ceiling. It flew down, screeching and flapping its wings. It landed on her face, grabbing her nose with its claws and continued to screech and flap its wings. It was flailing on her, and in response she began to flail as well. She tossed her head, bucked, and waved her wings, trying to dislodge the bat from her face. She swatted at it with her hooves, but it remained persistent. In the chaos, Twinblade's other sword broke. The blade became disconnected from the leather straps that supported them, flinging through the air and wedging itself between the books of a nearby shelf. The flying of the sword, however, seemed to finally scare the bat away. It released Twinblade's face, shrieking as it returned to the rafters on the ceiling. Its beady little eyes watched her, but Twinblades glared right back. She was tempted to fly up there and teach the bat a lesson. But getting aggravated at a bat at the moment of crisis wasn't smart. It had stopped its attack, and she had something more important to deal with. Now she was weaponless. With her second sword busted, she would have to ask Luna to fix this one as well. The princess would probably get a chuckle out of it. The other guards would as well when they heard. Twinblades broke her only sword, fighting a bat. Hardy har har. Moving up to the sword, Twinblades lifted a hoof to retrieve it from the shelves. She was just going to grab it and take it back to Luna, but then she froze. Her eyes were looking past the sword, caught in the reflection of the well-polished blade. She could see the reading area. She could see Princess Twilight laying unconscious at the base of the hearth. And above the princess, Twinblades could see her other sword being held, with murderous intent, by a dark silhouette. In a flash, Twinblades turned and leapt into the air. With wings spread, she sprinted the short distance that separated her from Twilight's assailant. She made no effort to slow herself, nor did she try to use any disarming technique she had learned as a guard. She acted with the swiftest possible option, tackling the assailant before they could plunge the sword into Twilight's chest. She and the mysterious silhouette fell to the ground, the pair landing hard as her sword clattered a few feet away. Twinblades began to wrestle, struggling to get a disabling hold on the large attacker. "Lieutenant, what are you doing?" Twinblade stopped herself immediately, stumbling away. The mysterious creature beneath her was Luna. She had just tackled the princess. She opened her mouth, grappling with some words to explain what she just did. I just saw you were standing over Twilight with my sword and I was fixing your sword, Luna answered as she picked herself off the ground. But I thought you were going to try and move Twilight first, Twinblade said, trying to comprehend how she could not have recognized the mysterious figure as Princess Luna. I was, but my magic could not lift her. Also, you may notice that something is different. Luna pointed a hoof at Twilight, now showing the young Alicorn's mane had changed. It now looked like Princess Celestia's, swirling lines of pastel pink, green, and blue. It resembled greatly the costume mane Twilight had been wearing to the Nightmare Night party. If Twilight is starting to transform again, do something different and possibly more dangerous. Twinblades lowered her head. So sorry, Your Highness, she said, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor as she turned to retrieve her wing blade, which had fallen to the ground a few feet away. I thought that you were someone else, someone trying to attack Twilight. Well, I assure you, Lieutenant, I am the only one in here right now, Luna said as she brushed some dust from her shoulder. Perhaps it would be best if you stood outside, while I tend to Twilight. We need to be sure my sister does not sneak up on us, and it would help guarantee that, your own paranoia, you do not tackle me again. Of course, Your Highness. Twinblades picked up her own wing blade, daring not to turn and look back at the princess. It was repaired, so she quickly secured it to her wing and gave it a few tests. She withdrew it and sheathed it, then repeated the process. On the third time, she drew the blade out and held it in front of her face. Though she trusted the princess's magic, it to satisfy her habitual need to inspect her weapon upon needing it. The mounting straps were tight, and the blade was firmly secured to the spring-loaded mechanisms. Sharp edge wasn't as pristine. They were all flat faces on the sword. The blades could cleanly see her eyes reflected in the surface. But that wasn't all. Lies mirrored our truth. In the reflection, Twinblades could see Twilight laying unconscious. Something was different. Twilight's mane was its natural color, purple with a few stripes. There were also something else. A flicker of color danced on the edge of the reflection, forcing Twinblades to adjust her sword to bring it into focus. It was the portrait of Celestia above the mantle. Its mane was waving, as if alive, and the princess's facial expression had changed. She was now frowning, looking down at Twilight with pained, sad eyes, like she was watching her student suffer with no easy way of easing or preventing the pain. Yet it was then, Celestia's reflection, her eyes turned, as if noticing she was being watched. The mirror image of the portrait, now staring straight at Twinblades. The stare was bone-chilling, like Celestia was suddenly putting the weight of the world on the lieutenant's shoulder. Twinblades almost wanted to look away, but the eyes remained locked with Celestia's as the princess mouthed, in silence, 2 words. Protect Twilight. Is something the matter, Lieutenant? Luna asked. No, she answered, stowing the wing blade and folding her wing. She turned and began walking towards the door. Her every intent was to do as she had been told, stand watch outside. But before she reached the door, she stopped. For several seconds, she stood there, debating whether or not the thoughts in her head were baseless paranoia. She drew her sword again, doing it slowly and quietly. A moment later, she almost put it away, wanting nothing more to dismiss these thoughts. But instead, she positioned the sword, tilting the blade so its reflective surface showed Twinblades, what stood directly behind her. Once more, she saw Princess Twilight, looking as normal as ever. Standing above her was something that was decidedly not Luna. Your Highness, Twinblade said quietly, not taking her eyes off the reflection. Why do you think Twilight Sparkle didn't disappear like Raven did? Hard for me to say, Luna answered, the dark silhouette and the reflection of Twinblade's sword taking a step to one side. It was turning, slowly bringing itself around to face her. I have little doubt that Twilight was guarding the candle that you were able to put out. But then one must wonder why my sister was guarding this library. There is no obvious sign of a second star in the room, yet Twilight remains. We Discord put them both to guard one star, but perhaps we must contemplate that the word star could have a broader definition. Twinblades tensed herself, watching her sword as the silhouette drew closer to her. What? Are you saying Twilight is one of the stars from Discord's riddle? Maybe, the princess answered, her voice getting closer to the figure in the sword's reflection as it drew near. A star in the dark night is a metaphor for hope, after all. Twilight certainly brings a great deal of hope to situations that seem otherwise bleak. She has saved the kingdom numerous times, and on top of that, she wields the element of magic. Yes, in many ways, my sister's student is a veritable star. But you wouldn't suggest we snuff that star, would you, Princess Luna? Of course not, the voice answered, beginning to lose its sweetness. I would never dream of that. I'd be betraying my sister even contemplating such a notion. The silhouette stepped outside the sword's reflection. Twinblade shifted the blade, trying to look at the figure. She even dared to turn her head, to look and find where Princess Luna had gone. She allowed her body to turn. She put the door to her back and held her sword defensively. There, however, was still no sign of Princess Luna. or the silhouette from the sword's reflection. Now that you mention it, this is a golden opportunity to snuff a snar. Don't you agree, Lieutenant? Twinblades could feel a hot puff of breath on her neck, as if a great beast was within moments of biting down on her spine and snapping her like a twig. How had that thing gotten behind her? How could she get out of this alive? The enemy was close. It could make a move before she could even react. She was dead. Every way the situation played out in her head, she was dead. At least until she heard the screeching of a bat. Don't snuff the lights. Twinblades landed in a forest. Her breathing labored. She leaned on one side, sliding Twilight's unconscious form off to the soft dirt. She was trembling, body on the verge of collapse. She bore a few cuts here and there, but as much as she wanted to linger, she couldn't. She could hear that thing following her. The bat, that crazy bat that had saved her life. But it wasn't enough to stop Princess Luna. Or maybe that had been Discord. The chaotic creature surely had enough power to pass himself off as the princess. Still, her sword, the reflective surface, had revealed the truth, and the bat gave her a chance to escape with Princess Twilight. But how? Discord or Luna or whoever was following them. She could hear it stomping through the trees. She couldn't carry Twilight any further. She had to lead it away. But to where? The only option she could think of was the castle. She could fly back there, retrieve and repair her other wing blade, and try to keep Discord distracted. If she did that long enough, the trail would get cold. Discord would have trouble finding Twilight, and once Twilight woke up, she'd have a chance to find help. It was a gambit, a risk, but so was staying with Twilight. Not everyone else she could save them. But Twilight could do it. She could get the help or figure out Discord's game and save everyone. It was a moment that made Twinblades recall what Nightgaze had done in the catacombs. Gave his life so the rest could go out alive. Now it was her turn. It was the burden of a guard of the kingdom, one that she was ready to bear. Not Discord. Twinblades pressed her back against the door of the guest room, trying to quiet her labored breathing. She heard the hoofsteps outside. She heard Luna calling to her, trying to lure her out like she was some lost puppy who didn't know better. Twinblades, however, would not be tricked or confused. She stayed silent, barely allowing herself to breathe as she listened to the hoofsteps outside the door. They lingered and circled, as if Princess Luna or Discord or whoever was closing in. The princess even stopped right outside the door. For a brief moment, Twinblades was sure she heard somebody touching the door hatch. But then the hoofsteps resumed, fading away until all was silent. Even then, Twinblades didn't dare move for several minutes. She kept waiting and listening, as if expecting Luna to return the moment she let her guard down. Minutes crawled on, and when silence persisted, Twinblades dared to step away from the door. She walked gingerly, crossing the room to the window. This was her chance. She'd fly outside and go to another part of the castle. She opened the window, feeling the chill of the night air on her face. It was like a whispered promise of freedom and continued survival. She also heard a screeching and clanking. Looking down from the window, Twinblades saw a prancing pony statue standing in front of the castle's main entrance. On its hoof, it was holding a cage. Within, a bat screamed and flailed without rest. Though she couldn't be sure from a fair distance, Twinblades believed it was the same bat who had saved her. She had seen other bats around the castle, and the one below certainly sounded the same. The bat also had the same level of tenacity as the one that attacked her in the library. After being locked in a cage for several minutes, it was still fighting and flailing, as if the princess had only just shut the door. For a moment, Twinblades debated freeing the bat. It would probably attack her afterwards, but it had saved her. She felt some sense of responsibility to pay back the debt owed, even if the bat ended up being a different one from before. Yet at the same time, something about the screeching was painful. Twinblades stepped back from the window, holding her head. The screeching was getting into her brain, soaring in deeper than it should have. It felt like claws against her skull. driving out all thoughts except for one. Something was wrong. She felt her stomach twist and knot, like she was being turned inside out. She gagged, but upon clenching her jaw, found her teeth felt too big. In fact, they were still growing, pushing apart her lips to the point she couldn't keep them shut completely. She lifted a hoof to her mouth, frantically feeling the sharp triangles where blunt squares should have been. She couldn't be. Not now. Stumbling forward, Twin Blades rested her hooves on the vanity. She tried to lift her head, but it suddenly felt too heavy. Muscles on her neck strained, eventually managing to lift her weighty skull. It came with a sense of vertigo. Her neck was longer. She could see it in the mirror, and she could see the teeth. Fangs larger than her eyes that were still glowing. Bigger and pushing her jaw to its limits. Everything felt wrong. Her hooves, her legs, they didn't feel like her own as she gripped the vanity, leaving shallow claw marks in the surface. The world was swimming, her vision blurring. Things were feeling more and more alien, but also growing more and more distant. She was losing control, transforming and becoming who knows what. Her bones felt too large inside of her legs. Throbbing pain began to emanate from her joints. She turned her elongated head just enough to see little sprouts of white starting to raise from her skin. She tried to will herself to fight it. She tried to imagine everything undoing itself. She tried to command it all to go back to what it was. But it didn't. It just continued, and her mind grew more and more disconnected from what was happening. Her body felt almost like a costume now, a beastly shape that she had put on for Nightmare Night. She heard the rattling of bones, vaguely perceiving them coming from her own ribcage, yet being unable to look. A beast of bone, of snarling teeth and undying determination. The same thing that killed Nightgaze. The bat's screech, however, stayed with Twin Blades. Even as everything else grew numb, even as her vision faded and her ears grew mute, the screeching remained. The screeching was just so painful. It was being stabbed by it. And yet, even that pain was beginning to drift away. The sound remained, but the ache disappeared. Now it was just a sound, a noise that fell into the background. It had a beat to it, subtle yet distinguishable, a beat that made the numbness feel all right. It was like a dream. Yes, a dream. What had she been dreaming about? Twin Blades honestly couldn't remember at first, but the details began to flow back as they were being whispered into her ear by a voice she couldn't hear, a voice mixing with being hidden by the bat's surrounding screeching. It was late at night. She was dreaming of working late. The sun had set, so she needed to get a lantern. She found it and hung it from a hook in the wall. The hook was low, almost like it was the same height as an average bedpost. But it didn't matter. She just needed some light, and the lantern was providing that. But why did she need the light? Twin Blades. She needed to write something down. It was for Princess Twilight. Yes, Princess Twilight needed to know about certain things. Things that she knew a lot about. She just needed to remember to tell the princess. She didn't need to write it all down. All she needed was the bullet points. A few bullet points was all she needed to write down. She used what seemed like an oversized quill to start writing these bullet points on an equally large piece of paper. This had to be very important. She needed to use such a large quill and piece of paper. What she needed to do was warn Princess Twilight. Yes, warn her about the castle that she and Princess Luna escaped from. Luna wasn't telling the whole story. It was like what she did at the catacombs. She withheld information, and now she was doing it again. Luna was lying, and Twin Blades knew how to prove it. She just had to write it down with her bullet points. Nothing scary, nothing bad. She just had to write down the bullet points. She began to write with the large quill. It sounded wrong against the paper, but that was okay. The quill was still writing. It was a special quill. She didn't even have to dip it in ink. She just had to write on the extra large piece of paper. All she had to do was make her notes so she could tell Princess Twilight Sparkle she knew. The elements of harmony were alive with energy. glowing trails of rainbows connecting the 5 jewels. Applejack and her friends floated in the air, halfway between the ballroom's ceiling and floor. The guards were watching in awe. None of them had ever seen the elements of harmony in use. They kept their distance, ensuring that whatever was about to happen had plenty of room to work with. Shining Armor was on the edge of the perimeter, looking on as the 5 gems filled the wish of the mayors that wielded them. That had been the trick they overlooked. Twilight's friends couldn't command the elements of harmony to find its missing piece, nor could they ask them to. No, the desire that had to be the foremost in their heart was their wish to find Twilight. That pure concern for their missing friend was what gave the elements their power. The light from the necklaces grew almost blinding as the spell continued. A few guards had to shy away, shielding their eyes with a forehoof. Shining Armor forced himself to keep watching, eyes watering from the brightness. The circle was glowing. Ethereal rainbows that connected the 5 elements began to fold in on one another, condensing until they were but a single, spherical, swirling point of color. That was when Twilight's friends began to descend, the spell gently returning them to the floor as their eyes began to flutter open. "Did it work?" Rarity asked, stumbling a bit. She was caught by a quick-acting guard, and she couldn't help but flash a thankful smile in his direction. "I think it did," Shining Armor answered, watching as the sphere of swirling rainbows began to float down as well. It was like a snowflake in the descent. It twirled and danced, nudged by even the slightest stream of air. A few guards tried to step forward. Shining Armor waved them back. Every pony watched intently, some even holding their breath, as the little sphere continued to sink. It touched the cold stone of the castle floor, sinking into a crack as if it were made of thick syrup. But then, from that tiny dot, a stream of rainbows began to flow along the seams of the brickwork. Some of the streams extended only to stop a few inches away, but others continued to stretch out, forming a distinctive path that was beginning to lead out of the ballroom. "I think it's leading the way," Rainbow Dash shouted, starting to trot along the flowing rivulets. Twilight's friends, Shining Armor, and a few guards followed his lead, trotting behind her as they were led out of the ballroom. It was a steady walk at first, but then a few guards had to break into a trot. Others followed soon after. The flow of magic was increasing in speed, the rivulets stretching out with greater and greater haste. Within minutes, there were ponies running through the halls of Canterlot Castle after a trail of magic. Guards were beginning to fall behind. Rainbow Dash had taken to the air, the only one managing to keep pace with the edge of the rivulets that were, slowly but surely, getting further and further away from the others. As soon as the rainbow rivulets descended the staircase, even Rainbow Dash began to have trouble. The tight spaces and sharp turns were slowing her down. She could still outpace the magic with raw speed, but it was beginning to get ahead of her because of the sheer maneuverability. But Rainbow continued to push herself, and not to be outpaced by a thing as silly as rivulets. She stopped paying attention to where she was being led. It was a race, one she couldn't afford to lose, yet was unable to truly win, and she didn't know where it would end. All she could do was keep pace with the rivulets, never letting them get too far ahead. She passed by some lingering guards on patrol for the later shifts. She heard the shouts from her friends asking her to slow down, but she couldn't do that. After all, if she let them get away, there was a chance the trail could disappear. Then they'd have to take the time to try and activate the elements a second time. That was time Rainbow Dash didn't want to waste. Down more stairs and through more corridors the rivulets went, leading Rainbow Dash into the parts of the castle that were rarely visited by a living soul. Hallways connected to storage rooms that held decorations from celebrations both recent and past. Dungeons that had not been put to use in decades, left to sit hollow and empty as lawbreakers of the kingdom were placed into the prison system. It was to the castle's greatest depths that the rivulets flowed, and Rainbow Dash followed them until they came to a stop at a singular door. Flapping her wings and shifting her weight, Rainbow Dash just barely managed to stop herself from crashing headlong into the door. The rivulets flowed unimpeded beneath the seam of the door, but passing through the frame was not as easy for Rainbow Dash. The door was sealed with 3 thick, parallel iron cross bars, each one padlocked to metal mounts that protruded from both sides of the door's frame. It was like the door itself was in shackles. suffering some punishment in the castle's lowest chambers. Rainbow Dash tugged at a few of the crossbars, seeing if she could pry them loose as the sound of galloping hooves began to come up behind her. The others came to the end of the hallway, Rarity and Shining Armor's horns providing light as they all looked upon the door. "We have to get through this," Rainbow Dash told them, still trying to pull the bars off with her own strength. "The Rainbow River went under these doors." "Shining, do you have a key to these locks?" Applejack asked, holding one of the padlocks in a forehoof. "No, I don't. These are the only 3 copies of the key that open the lock. 2 of them are supposed to be with the held princesses." "Why is that? What's behind the door?" Rarity asked. "It leads to the crystal caverns beneath Canterlot, the place where the changeling queen imprisoned Cadence during our wedding," Shining Armor answered. His words ushered a silence across the whole group as they looked back towards the door.